I'm Dr. Samson, Assistant Professor of English, Bishop Weber College, Trichy. So, in this lecture, we are discussing about the Aravind Adiga's The White Tiger. In this lecture, we are discussing this novel, The White Tiger, written by Aravind Adiga. As we know, this is the novel which received the Man Booker Prize in the year 2008. And in that, this is also when seen as one of those novels which brought the Booker event to the field of Indian fiction in English. Nevertheless, it also needs to be told at this point that though this is Booker just like a Rusty's novel and just like Arundhati Roy's novel, has not received the kind of critical attention that the other Booker events have received. And this is something very interesting, especially if you have a critical interest in the looking at how the literary historiography, the critical tradition are being framed, and it will also be possible to notice that at some level, the critical interest and the acute kind of protection of secondary material, as far as Indian fiction in English is concerned, it is risks are from Midnight Children's of 1981 and till Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things. And for some reasons or the other, the novels which are bookered after this, especially namely Adigas The White Tiger and Krentai's The Inheritance of Loss, they fail to make it to this league which is bookended between Trustees and Arundhati Roy. However, it will be interesting to ask those extra literary questions which will tell us a thing or two about how the literary tradition, how canon is formed, how historiography gets written, etc. Of course, you would come across a few papers, essays, and articles written about Adiga's work, and many have also spoken about how he tries to bring back the discussion of caste into the aura of Indian fiction in English. And while Rusty began to narrate the story of India, he began to retell the story of the nation from a different vantage point. Here we have a novel in Adiga's work, The White Tiger, which is a tale of two Indias. He talks about two different kinds of India, and he talks about the protagonist Balram's journey from the darkness of village life to the light of entrepreneurial success. So, at some level, this is also the kind of themes which have not been taken into account as far as Indian fiction in English is concerned. But we should not forget even for a minute that this is also the work which received lot of lack, lot of terrible reviews which were written about this work. Many were extremely unhappy that this kind of writing was awarded the Booker Prize, and this would be rather interesting to take a look at it. When you take a detailed look at this work, and the protagonist, unlike the other protagonist in most of the leading less Indian English novels, it is Balram Halwai who is an ordinary man, and it's a story of someone who rises from rags to riches. So we will be able to bring in a lot of interesting insights into the reading of this work. We find the interplay of class and caste. Over here, we find the dichotomy of rural and the urban bringing in interesting, showcasing interesting tales and interesting insights. So we also find that this at some level also about life in post-independent India. It is also about the ordinary life. It's also about the extraordinary things that happens in an ordinary life in post-independent India. So this does deals with the nation. This does deals with the lived realities, the lived experiences within the nations. But the take is entirely different, as you would begin to see. It's not an approach which looks at mega canvas like Rusty's Midnight Children or Amita Ghosh The Shadow Lines. This has a more localized flavor to it. It has human and even dehumanized side to it. This one is not too sure about the processions that the novel advocates. It is also about the new India which has opened up newer possibilities, the new India which continues to fight with the many realities and many limitations of caste, the limiting factors of class, the constraints of gender, but it is also the new India which would enable someone to cross over these barriers. How much of this can be taken for face value and how much of this needs to be stained and this way, and this was it another question that perhaps that we need to discuss. So this is fantastic review that Pankaj Misra wrote about Adigas novel. I retell this also had made its way to the plaques of most of the editions of this work with remorselessly and delightfully modern with the White Tiger anatomizes the fantastic carvings of the rich. It evokes too with a startling accuracy and tenderness the no less desperate struggles of the deprived. So, this is the novel in which we find the lives of the rich, the lives of the poor, the lives of the haves and the have nots is getting intertwined in particular ways, and it is. So, one thing that we really like about the telling of this novel is that it is very non judgmental, and we may have different opinions about the critical merit or the critical aspirations of this work. How this lends itself to certain frameworks of post colonial theory. That apart, the work tries to be pretty much non judgmental in its approach. Paltram Halwai, the central protagonist of this work, he is enduring, and it is the possibilities that he begins to use and misuses that also begins to frighten us in certain ways. So it will be appropriate to mentioning of Rusty's work, the illusion, the intertextual illusions in reference to Rusty's work. In another one of the Adiga's work, Adiga had also written a short story collection titled Between the Assassinations. This is set of stories which book in between two major assassinations, that modern India or the assassination of Indira Gandhi and the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. So this is set of narratives which tells about certain experiences of particularly a non-middle class. Another background I read to you this interesting remark about Rusty's work from one of the short stories in this collection. So it comes towards the end of this particular uh, short story, which is titled Day 2 Afternoon in Lighthouse Hill. So, and the last sentence about a certain character, a boy named who comes to be known as Jerax. So, and this is how the last line of the short story reads. The book was banned throughout the Republic of India, and it was the only things that Jerax entered there to sell that day. So, the satanic verse by Salman Rushdie. I find this illusion extremely useful and enduring, and it is also one way in which of the young writers who also claims this legitimacy through the writings of Rushdie, which gives a tribute to this ancestor, the literary ancestor of his Salman Rushdie. So with this, I also leave you to the your reading of this work, and hope you would be able to come up with the very good, interesting observation which would be place this novel in particular ways within the literary tradition, and as well as within the larger frame of Indian writing in English.